Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Yavanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parojikacharya Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parojikacharya Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktabinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, now I have to ask, is anyone here, either you or your husband, who knows how to turn this down a little bit? You do not. You do not. I guess I'll have to do it myself. All right, just give me a second, because I don't want to wake up Vijay. That's my great fear when I give this class. It's a little bit too loud. Huh? Yeah. This is a miracle thing going on for a year now without problems. Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully, Jagatala will be back soon. She can do all this stuff. Okay, let's see where we are. So this is the 20th, yes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 20th day of September 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in the second chapter entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized, page 89, text number 22. Okay. Vasangsi Jirnani Yata Vihaya Navani Gunnati Naro Parani Tatha Sharirani Vihaya Jirnani Anyani Sangyati Navani Dehi. All right, so just before we begin, every so often we get a word. Oh, please don't put it on the floor. Just put it under the book. Yeah, you can put it underneath the book. There you go. Thank you. Every so often we get a word that ends in I, and the next word begins with a vowel. You see the end, the third line there? Jinan Y, the Y? That used to be an I, if you look at the word by words. But the rules in Sanskrit is that it's called Sandhi rules. Sandhi means where two words meet. And the last letter of the first word will often change to accommodate smooth chanting. The whole thing is to accommodate the chanting. So that I became a Y, and that Y, if I was just chanting the verse, it would sound like this. Tata shadirani bihaya jirnan yangnani sangyati navani dehi. You see that? That Y goes with the next word. But since we're not doing it that way, we're going to pronounce that Y back like it was like an I. You see? Because I'm going to chant the line and you're going to repeat, right? So therefore the sandhi is broken. So that Y now reverts to its original I. All right? Yes, yes. You can. I'll chant it and you'll be able to hear and you'll see. Just to let you know. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya navani gunnati naro parani tata shidirani vihaya jirnani anyati sangyati navani dehi. Okay. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya navani gunnati naro parani tata shirirani vihaya jirnani anyati sangyati navani dehi. You want to try it, Virachandra? Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya navani gunnati naro parani tata sharirani vihaya jirnani anyati sangyati navani dehi. Want to try it, Yugo?
Sure.
No, I'm sorry. Yugo Kishore? Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya gunnati. Yeah, navani gunnati naro parani Sharirani. Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani. Samyati. Anyani samyati navani dehi. You can try if you want. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya. Navani granati nodo parani. Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani. Anyati samyati navani dehi. Not bad. Brajamandala. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya. Navani granati nodo parani. Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani. Anyani samyati navani dehi. You don't have to do it if you don't want. It's okay. Okay. Anyone online?
Vasasmi jirani yata vihaya.
Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya.
Navani granati naro parani.
Navani granati naro parani.
Tata shrirani vihaya jiranani. Or jirani.
Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani.
Anyani samyati navani dehi.
Anyani samyati navani dehi. Okay.
Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya.
Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya.
Navani granati naro parani.
Navani granati naro parani.
Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani.
Tata sharirani vihaya jirnani.
Anyani samyati navani dehi.
Anyati samyati navani dehi. Thank you. Vasangsi, garments. Jirnani, old and worn out. Yata, just as. Vihaya, giving up. Navani, new garments. Grinhati, does accept. Naraha, a man. Aparani, others. Tata, in the same way. Sharirani, bodies. Vihaya, giving up. Jirnani, old and useless. Anyani, different. Sangyati, verily accepts. Navani, new sets. Dehi, the embodied. Okay. Translation. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Purport. Change of body by the atomic individual soul is an accepted fact. From the modern scientists who do not believe in the existence of the soul, but at the same time cannot explain the source of energy from the heart, even the modern scientists who do not believe in the existence of the soul, but at the same time cannot explain the source of energy from the heart, have to accept continuous changes of body which appear from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and again from youth to old age. From old age, the change is transferred to another body. This has already been explained in the previous verse, 213. Transference of the atomic individual soul to another body is made possible by the grace of the supersoul. The supersoul fulfills the desire of the atomic soul as one friend fulfills the desire of another. The Vedas, like the Mundaka Upanishad, as well as the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, compare the soul and the supersoul to two friendly birds sitting on the same tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, the tree, by the way, is the body. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend. Of these two birds, although they are the same in quality, one is captivated by the fruits of the material tree, while the other is simply witnessing the activities of his friend. Krishna is the witnessing bird, and Arjuna is the eating bird. Although they are friends, one is still the master, and the other is the servant. Forgetfulness of this relationship by the atomic soul is the cause of one's changing his position from one tree to another or from one body to another. The jiva soul is struggling very hard on the tree of the material body. But as soon as he agrees to accept the other bird as the supreme spiritual master, as Arjuna agreed to do by voluntary surrender unto Krishna for instruction, the subordinate bird immediately becomes free from all lamentations. Both the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.2 and Shvetashvatar Upanishad 4.7 confirm this. Samani vrikshe purusho nimagno nishaya sochati mahyamanaha jushtang hida pashyat yanyam isham asya mahimanam iti vita shokaha. Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend, the Lord, and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Arjuna has now turned his face towards his eternal friend, Krishna, and is understanding the Bhagavad Gita from him. And thus, hearing from Krishna, he can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from lamentation. Arjuna is advised herewith by the Lord not to lament for the bodily change of his old grandfather and his teacher. He, Arjuna, should rather be happy to kill their bodies in the righteous fight so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in the proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a higher status of life. So there was no cause for Arjuna's lamentation. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this verse is another one which is so intuitive. You know, the first verse back that Prabhupada mentions in the purport here, 213. 213 is a verse that any layman, if he just contemplates it and thinks about it, says, yeah, that makes sense. And what 213 says is, Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jala tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuyati. So what that means is that dehina means the soul in the body. The word deha means body. Dehina is very easy to remember. It has the word in it. Dehina, the soul in the body. Dehino asmin, asmin in this body. The body, soul, each of us has a body, right? Dehe, in the body. Kaumaram yob. Now the word kaumara is that little boy, but it works for little girls also. Okay, I mean little baby, body is passing, as we can experience it ourselves. We can just think of our life. We had, the earliest I remember was, I think I was 5 years old. I was riding a tricycle. That was my first memory. That's the only memory I had from that time. But I know, I had a whole life at that time, right? I was doing all kinds of things, So then gradually you get older, right? And your body changes, your brain changes, you get education, right? So your consciousness is changing, your mind is changing, your senses are changing, but you're the same person. So what is it that's the same? The consciousness, the soul. The soul doesn't change. So we're in the heart, and the body is growing as it normally does, and we're passing through these different ages. Kaumaram, Yovanam, then you're a youthful, right? Adolescent, everyone goes through, okay. Then you're an adult, and you gradually keep going, right? The body keeps changing. And then Jara, old age comes, right? And then, okay, I got to get my diet together, I better get more sleep, a little exercise, and worry about my health care in order. So there's a whole bunch of other worries, all based on the body. But everyone knows it's going to come to an end, right? So the verse goes, Kaumaram yovanam jara, and then tata, then dehantara praptir, attains another body. So eventually you die. We just had one lady, she died a couple of days ago. You probably don't, you remember her, Diane. She passed. And she was somewhat of a devotee. She had other interests, but for years she hosted a program at her house of devotees. I would go up there, drive up to Encinitas. And she did a lot of service, But now she's gone, and her son was there and other friends. She had many friends, And there'll be a memorial here for her. They're going to have a memorial probably in a week or so. So, when I knew her, she was always like a little bit older than me. So, and she's about Ishtadev's age, almost 80 like that. Okay, so now she's gone, but she knew the philosophy, and if you know the philosophy, it's just, this is such an intuitive verse, right? That other one goes, okay, just as you pass through boyhood and childhood, youth, old age, and get another body at death. If one is dhira, now that word dhira in that previous verse is very important, because it means one who is sober-minded, who knows things as they are, is not freaked out by these changes, I'm dying, I won't exist anymore. No, you'll exist, The important thing is to understand the philosophy when, you have some health in your body, and you can follow principles that will give you the best next body. The best next body is not material at all. It's going back to Godhead. We should understand that the basic philosophy that all of our sojourn, which means our stay, it can be billions of years more, in this material world, this is not natural for us as spirit souls. We ourselves are intrinsically Satchit Ananda, which is what Krishna is. It means eternal. We're never born and never die as souls. That's right in the previous verse, right? Najayate Mrityava. And our nature is, because we're part and parcel of Krishna, we have the same nature. And his life is Satchidananda. It's eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Now we can just compare, well, my life is certainly not eternal, and I have some knowledge, but there's many millions of things I don't know, and where's the bliss? It's certainly not. There's a few high points of pleasure, but Prabhupada said, those are your worst enemy. To try to take pleasure in the senses of this world, which obviously has a beginning and an end, simply deepens your attachment and your entanglement in the material world. Because what happens is, what determines our next body? Our consciousness that we have developed in this body. Every day, every moment, we're creating it. So, now, if we know what kind of consciousness we should develop, so we'll have a better life, or even the perfect life in the next life, why not try for it? That's the whole point. And this is a very mysterious science. It's nothing, you can't investigate this by what's called the ascending process, by experiment. They can have their microscopes and X-rays, whatever they have. They're not going to see the super soul, and they're not going to see the soul in the body. But I pointed this out. Back in the 70s, soon after I joined, there were more and more cases of this near-death experience, which is now very common in hospitals, right? People are having an operation and they practically die, and all the doctors run in. I used to work in a hospital. I don't know, they shock the body, and sometimes, if someone revives, obviously, they come to say, oh, I was watching from the ceiling. And I remember this doctor came in, and then you did this, and why did you do that? And the doctors write this up. There's a book compiled like that. And in other instances, which I spoke of this Dr. Ian Stevenson, I'm sure he's long gone by now into his next body. But he heard about instances, especially in India, because that's the culture, but it can happen anywhere. And of children who grow up, and when they first start talking, they say something like, oh, you're not my real father. What? Yes, I had a mother, usually it's from nearby village or something, her name was this, and like this, and I lived there, and then she died, and whatever, And then he would check, he would go to the village and find, is there really someone? Yes, there really was someone like that, confirming the child's memories, that as soon as they can talk, they can start to. Well, this is, he wrote a whole book of instances like that. And then there was something on YouTube, this was years ago, some little kid who was claiming, I was a World War II pilot, and I flew this plane, and I did this, and they checked it out. And he was born in some Lutheran family or something. What is this? What is that kid talking about? But they couldn't deny it. It was true. There wasn't a guy who died, who flew that plane. So these are, little empirical backups for what Krishna is saying very carefully. And that is, every single one of us is going to transmigrate into another body. So the question is, well, and we should know, we have two bodies. We have the gross body, we're all aware of the body, but there's also the subtle body, and that's what really counts, the mind, intelligence, and ego, the sense of self. Now we have what is called a hankar, which is false ego, because practically everyone is identifying with this body. But we're not the body. That's what you learn here, with the soul, right? With the consciousness in the body. That's an essential distinction. And the body changes, and the body dies, but the soul doesn't. And this analogy of the coat is perfect. It's like as you get older, certain things wear out. They don't operate like they did before. It says, all the things. It's a progression of loss of function and loss of everything. So you try to keep your spirits going, but I can still enjoy this. I can still watch TV and drink, whatever. It's pathetic. Because as you get older, you should be preparing for the next life. That's why there's, in the Vedic culture, family life is not supposed to last to the bitter end. There's supposed to be some retirement and separation and dedicating your whole time to chanting and hearing and trying to develop your Krishna consciousness. Because whatever consciousness you develop, that will take you to your next body. And so if you're actually free of material desire, and your desire is to serve Krishna and to chant Hare Krishna, and you're feeling the bliss of Krishna consciousness, that's very auspicious. You may actually go back to Godhead. The whole thing is, what's your main thought at the time of death? When we reach chapter 8, there's 3 verses that provide a little lesson. I like to find these. In the Bhagavatam, you'll find that 6 or 8 verses, and it's a complete lesson. And here you have this complete lesson. We all have books, so this is very good. So chapter 8, text 4, 5, and 6, I think it is. No, 5, 6, and 7. It's a whole complete lesson in Krishna consciousness. So if you'd like, we can turn. So page 349. So he says, I'll say, you can read. Those who can. The whole thing is, sometimes I think because when I learned English, to read back in 1952, 53, I was about 6 or 7, I was in first grade. It was all phonetic. We learned syllable by syllable and you put it together. But then I heard that they started looking at the whole word rather than phonetics. But we're back to phonetics here with the Sanskrit. Every syllable counts. You just have to learn. So here's our Antakale Chamameva. You know that one? Antakale, text 5, chapter 8. He's talking about the end time. He's talking about death here. Antakale Chamameva. Antakale Chamameva. Smadan Muktva Kalevaram. At the bottom of page 349, chapter 8, text 5. Antakale Chamameva. Come on, you can do it. Smadan Muktva Kalevaram. Yak Priyati Samadbhavam. Yati Nastyatra Sangshayaha. Oh, we got a little B there, huh? All right. We'll just leave him be, and then we'll try to get him out after the class. He looks like he's not doing much flying these days. Yeah. Okay, so what's the meaning here? And whoever, at the end of his life, quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. This is like basic, essential Krishna conscious philosophy. If we can, between now and when we leave the body, and I don't want to be a downer here, but every one of us is going to leave the body, right? Between that now and that time, we can cultivate Krishna consciousness so that we see Him everywhere, we're chanting Him, we're Krishna conscious. Then when we leave the body, we'll think of Krishna, and we'll go to Krishna, back home, back to Godhead. That's the idea. It's not easy because we're so conditioned from who knows how many millions of births without Krishna consciousness. But Lord Chaitanya left us this very powerful process centered on chanting this holy name, by which if you can just chant Hare Krishna when you leave the body, you're successful, But the mind I like to say the mind has a mind of its own. You know, the mind doesn't cooperate a lot. So we have to learn how to train the mind in Krishna consciousness. And it's centered on this chanting and so many other rules and regulations, the do's and the don'ts. It's a matter of surrender. What does surrender begin as? Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. You know this. There's 6 elements of Sharanagati. Anukulyasya, accepting those things favorable devotional service. Chant Hare Krishna. You know, try to chant 16 rounds a day. That's really good, you know. And associate with devotees and do all these, you know, things. Come to the temple, take prasadam, you know, positive things. And don't do these other things. In any discipline, there's a list of do's and don'ts. You know, I learned to play the flute at one point. You've heard me a little bit playing the flute. And so I actually went to a teacher. You know, it was one of these silver flutes, Western flutes with all the keys on it, you know, and everything. And how to make a sound. Oh, quick. You blow, you're not making a sound. Finally, you make a little sound. Oh, very good, you know. So you gradually learn, called the embouchure. So, but I needed a teacher. Do it this way, don't do it that way. Hold it this way, don't hold it that way. It's obvious. Anything, running, any school, you know. So there's do's and don'ts, and the big don'ts. Oh my God, how am I going to do those 4 regular principles? You know, we'll start with the easy one. No gambling. How are we doing with the gambling? Right? No gambling. All right, so we're doing that one. That's the easiest one. No intoxication. You know, which is a big thing in the modern culture, even up to the point of tea and coffee. You know, and no meat eating. Well, I'm already a vegetarian. Actually, you find out that a lot of people who are vegetarian, they're more open to the philosophy, which is part of it. But okay, but that's obviously after taking a few feasts, you know, and having some prasada, you realize, yeah, I can pretty well subsist without meat. I don't need meat, you know, it's a big thing. And then no illicit sex. But that's like, okay, that's the price you have to pay. What's the thing you're trying to buy? Eternal life, full of bliss and knowledge. Is it worth trying? Yes, that's the price. You know, because that's the biggest, you know, draw and the illusion of this world, that you can enjoy that. But ultimately, it's very frustrating, and so many verses I would get into in the Bhagavatam how that can be a big entanglement. So anyway, this is the first thing in this little lesson. So let's go on, because now he gives the general principle. Yang vapi smarang bhavam. Smaram bhavam chajajante kalevadam tam tame vaiti kaunteya sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Now he's giving the general principle. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. You see, this is the bottom of page 350. I'm sorry, just going one verse after another. Yeah. So that's the general principle. And it holds, it's like a scientific principle. But who knows that? You know, I worked in a hospital, I saw so many people die, and what do? You know, the nurses say, okay, there's so much sedation, you know, and then when the sedation wears off, they watch the TV. This is what's filling their mind. It's sad that people don't know, you know. But devotees, the ideal way for devotees, no matter what's, you know, how much advancement, is to be surrounded by devotees chanting Hare Krishna at your bedside. I've done that, I don't know, at least a dozen times over the years. Because, you know, I can sing kirtan a little bit. There was this one devotee, you remember Radhanath Das? Yes, this was a heroic devotee. I knew him in Miami when he was just getting his disease, you know, he was still walking and everything. And he had some kind of degenerative neurological disease. And when I knew him, he could walk, and then when he came here, he was in a wheelchair, but he would go out every day and distribute books. It's because of Radhanath Das that we have Balaram Das. He got his book from Radhanath in a parking lot somewhere. Someone would wheel him out, you know, and he would be laying in people would, you know, he'd be giving the books. Heroic figure. And then finally the time came, you know, and he asked me to be at the side, and we were all chanting around. And I remember Rohini, those who know Balaram's mother, she was there, and she thanked him for giving the book that Balaram got, and she got a book, you know, like that. So this is, you know, and so he had a great chance to remember Krishna. We were all chanting Hare Krishna, you know. He decided to go. He didn't have to go. The doctor said, well, you know, he's been kind of independent, but now he's got to be on a breathing machine all the time. But, you know, there's no reason why you can't, who knows, live another few years, you know. He said, forget it, you know. So he arranged, you know, he said it was going to happen on Thursday. And so we all got there on Thursday. And I remember at the hospital, you know, a lot of devotees came. So, and so many, Ojasvi and a bunch of others. And and Prabhupada showed the way. He himself was surrounded by devotees chanting Hare Krishna. And, you know, that's the ideal. Jayananda, I was in LA, but I wasn't at his bedside, but that's the way he left also, hearing Prabhupada chant, you know, like that. So that's as successful as you can be, you know, and you have a good chance of going back to the spiritual world. Or whatever it is, it's going to be an auspicious birth. Whereas people who don't know this, they risk, you know, oh my God, you know, being absorbed in the video games all the time, you can imagine, and eating anything, drinking. Your consciousness is who knows what's going to happen. You probably lose the human form of life, which is the greatest danger. The most fearful danger is to waste the human form of life in such a way that you even lose it and you go back down into the species. Nobody dies, but you can postpone your advancement a long time. Then you have to come up the species gradually till you come to human form of life. And who knows if you'll meet a devotee again, you know. So the whole point is, don't waste time. Like I liked this verse from the 11th canto. Labdva sudurlam amidam bahusam bhavante. Manushim artatam anityam apiya dhira. Here's that word dhira again. It's appearing several times already in the Gita. Dhira, thoughtful, self-controlled, sober-minded. Let me look at the long range. What am I doing with my life? How can I have a success? You know, like that. Then he says, Turnam yateta napateta namritya yavad niksheya saya vishaya kalu sarvataksya. So first he says, I think this is Krishna speaking, Labdva sudurlabam idam bahusam bhavante manushim. The word manushim is almost like English cognate. Man, human life. You have attained, after a long time, the very difficult to attain, rare human form of life, compared to, you know, we just has one bee here. Of course, the bees, they're killing off the bees. But there's so many billions and trillions of insects and plants, and just a lawn has like, what, you know, 1 million different living entities. Every blade of grass is another living entity, you know. So we're lucky, we're rare, even though there's 8 billion of us. And then among the 8 billion, how many are really aware of this philosophy to practice? So you're very fortunate. Forget about winning the lottery. You not only won the lottery by being a human being, but you're interested in this philosophy. Don't waste it. This is our chance to succeed. So this is the verse is joining us. This is the Bhagavad Gita, so beautiful. You have attained the rarely attained human form of life after many, many births. That's the first proposition. And what is the special quality of this human form of life as opposed to all the others? Artadam means that it can give the final goal of the life of the soul. You know, these other forms, the soul just lives for a few years and then gets another birth and dies. You know, there's no progress. But human, because of the intelligence, we can artadam. But like all others, it's anityam. The body is certainly temporary. Soul is eternal, but your chance is in the human form. So one has to be dhira, same word dhira, thoughtful, self-controlled, you know. And then what? Turnam yateta. Turna means don't waste time, immediately, before you get distracted into something. Strive. Yateta means to strive. What to strive for? He said before, yateta napateta namitya, as long as you haven't died, as long as you know you got your wits about you. Strive for what? Nikshayasaya, the ultimate good. The ultimate good is simple. It starts with the simple concept of getting free from the round of birth, death, old age, and disease. That's the real problem we have, and nobody can address that. You know, Prabhupada says they can accelerate death, they can invent the atom bomb, but can they end death? Can they end disease? No. You know, they have all these $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion. Health care system, you know, but it's all, you know, maybe we leave a little bit, you know, but death is going to come. So strive for what? Without wasting time. Nikshayasa, the ultimate good. The ultimate good is getting free from birth, old age, disease, and death, and returning to our original home in the spiritual world. Each of us has a home in that world, paradise. Like I wrote this little poem. There's a painting, and the paintings are really good. Prabhupada really appreciated the art, even in its rudimentary form when it first started. You know, he saw each painting as a window to the spiritual world. He would look at the paintings different than we would. He would actually enter into that kirtan, if Lord Chaitanya is there, or see, you know, be with Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield. That's how he was seeing that. So he's saying that this entrance into the spiritual world. So the painting goes. The painting is of Krishna. I don't know if you're so familiar with the paintings. Krishna's sitting out in the forest of Vrindavan. You know, idyllic. He's very beautiful, of course. And he's got a little bird on here. It looks like a little dove or something, you know. And there's a deer, and there's a swan, and there's a little cow. You see, surrounded by them. And so I wrote the poem like this. It says, the sweetness of Govinda's form beguiles. Still sweeter is his face, like autumn moon, but sweeter than the sweetest is his smile, whose luscious beauty makes the gopis swoon. Govinda's beauty captivates the doves, the swans, the deer, the cows, and every tree. Indeed, in Braja, every creature loves Sri Krishna and is drowned in ecstasy. That all-enchanting land is paradise, our home, where we may dwell eternally. Most welcome there are those who pay the price to learn to love Sri Krishna perfectly. And that's what this movement is all about. That's what Hare Krishna means. Bhakti Yoga. It means not developing something, you know, developing a skill that we didn't have before, but awakening, reviving something that's already there, but it's being distorted. All of our desires for sense pleasure is simply a distortion of the original prema that we have, love for Krishna. That's explained very nicely at the end of the 3rd chapter, which we're going to get to fairly soon. Arjuna asked a question that we can all ask. Well, okay, I know what's right to do, but what is it that impels us to do things that we know are wrong? You know, what is that? Kama esha, krodha esha, rajogana, samudbhava, mahashano, mahapapma, vidyanamiha, vaidinam. Heavy duty verse. Vaidinam means enemy. You got to realize there's millions of enemies out there for Arjuna, you know. He's ready to fight them. But the real enemy is in here. Kama is a material desire. Now that kama is simply prema that has been, if you will, curdled by contact with the modes of nature. That desire, you see, our original desire is so pure, it's simply the desire that Krishna will be pleased. And that gives us the greatest pleasure. And it gives Krishna the greatest pleasure. When we try to enjoy independently, that's our ticket to another birth and death and suffering. And that brings up my favorite verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Yehi sangsparjaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya netaishu ramate buddha. Buddha means the wise. So he's saying here. Here's the new translation. An intelligent person does not take part in pleasures which are due to the contact of the senses with the sense objects. O son of Kunti, such pleasures are the sources of misery and have a beginning and an end, and so the wise do not delight in them. So what he's implying there is that there is another source of pleasure that is not the source of misery, that doesn't have an end, and that is ever increasing, and that's prema bhakti. Now, it's on the spiritual platform, so it's alien to us because we only experience the physical things. But that's what bhakti means. It means to gradually cultivate attraction for Krishna and everything related to Krishna, the holy name and the devotees and the temple and the deity and the whole lifestyle and everything, you know. And at the same time, lose our attraction for these material so-called pleasures that are entrapping us birth after birth in this material body, material life. So it's all very real. It sounds fantastical, you know, but this is where the faith comes in. And because we're contacting Srila Prabhupada, and he's coming in a line of towering intellects who accepted all of this as true and who lived it, you know. Now who are we going to believe? Our own, you know, mad mind, and materialists who have some other misconceptions are anything but Satchidananda? Or are we going to believe Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was so, wonderful writer, and all the way back, Madhvacharya? I mean, there's a whole list of them. We're part of that sampradaya, that disciplic session. We have an opportunity to develop faith in them and their words and their teachings and their life example, and to follow as far as we can, So that's what this is all about. And Prabhupada knew exactly what he was doing by supplying these books, because here we are, almost 50 years after Prabhupada departed this planet, and we're able to associate with him very intimately by his words. The words are the most important thing, the sound vibration. And this has been my most blessed gift, that I've been able to work on these words all for 50 years, practically, and tweak them in such a way. That translation you heard anyway, there's so many others I could give you, my favorite. My offering this year for Prabhupada was a review of some of my favorite changes. I mean, Prabhupada says in one purport, there's a whole backstory to this purport. He says, even if one thinks there are no pure devotees in the Hare Krishna movement, still one should stick to the movement. And if there is any problem, you can consult the spiritual master, you can write a spiritual master like that. Now, in the first printing, which was 1975, and it lasted 20 years before we reprinted, and I revised it, that left out a little part of that, which was sticking to the movement. I'm not sure if it was on purpose or not. I'm not going to get into that. So I revived that, and it caused a big stir, because people said, well, this is obviously an interpolation by Dravida Das carrying water for the GBC to try to get us to stay in the movement when we know there's this, and this, and that. But no, there I got the original transcript of Prabhupada. And Burijan, there's a whole pastime about this one. I won't tell the story. It's getting late. But Burijan Prabhu was in Hong Kong at the time with his wife. And they were getting a little bit estranged from ISKCON because they were being influenced by like a little rogue group from Hawaii. I won't get into details about his history. So he stopped going to Mangalartik. They had a little center. Prabhupada heard about it. He flew there specifically to save his disciples. And he dictated that purport, and part of it is for Burijan, because he was getting away from the ISKCON line. So he dictated everything because it sped things up, and he had Satsu with him to actually do the transcript with him. He was the typist, but he didn't bother with the transcript. He called Burijan in to hear the tape, so he heard probably on the tape. There's no question of the transcriber getting it. So he's a witness to the whole thing. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that thing. But there's a whole history of these books coming out and the editing, and it was difficult. Prabhupada's English and the transcription, that is the whole thing. And if you're interested, I can send you some documents. Back in '97 with Jayadvaita Swami, I published. We worked on it together. Something called Responsible Publishing, where we try to explain what we did and what needed to be done and Prabhupada's justification. And it's been an ongoing conversation. But who's going to argue against that change? Or how about one more? Second canto. There's a verse that's a famous verse. Akama sarvakamo va mokshakamo dadadi ti vena bhakti yogena yajeta purushapada. Means whether you're filled with all kinds of material desires, or you're free of material desires and you're a mukta, or you want liberation, you should practice Krishna consciousness with intensity. You should intensely and fervently practice. So this is the purport to that verse. And there's a phrase quoted from Jiva Goswami's Sundarbas. He doesn't say which one. And it's kind of a real koan, like a little summary of the essence of pure bhakti. Bhajaniya padama purusha sukha matva swasukatvam, which means one should come to the state where one's only happiness lies in the happiness of Krishna. In other words, that's where you get your pleasure in giving Krishna pleasure. And if you study Radharani's, we're coming up on Radhastami in 2 days, right? And I'm supposed to give a talk, so that's the essence of her personality, is that she simply is dedicated 100% to giving Krishna pleasure. And meanwhile, she's also enjoying like anything, you know. And so, I'm sorry, I'm not leaving any time for questions. Did you want to add something? Or add something? No. So what does that say? Bhajaniya padama sukhamana. It means that one should take one's pleasure only in giving Krishna pleasure. So Prabhupada precedes that, says, well, the real desirelessness means that one should only desire the pleasure of Krishna. But what it came out as, in retyping and so forth, and that real desireless means that one should desire one's pleasure only from Krishna. Do you see the thing? Not that one should only desire Krishna's pleasure, but that one should desire one's own pleasure only from Krishna. And because it makes some kind of sense, no one notices it till now. We're now like 60 years down the road. This is since 1972. This was published in 1973. So what is it? 50 years, and no one caught it. So even today, so that's going to be fixed. Yeah, we fixed. One should desire only Krishna's pleasure, not that one should desire one's pleasure only from Krishna. Anyway, so this is to say that these books don't need revision. There are these things that need fixing. Bring it back to what Prabhupada said, isn't it? All right, we're almost out of time, but if there are no questions or comments, I'll leave you with a poem. All right. So I just worked on the captions for the calendar next year. Hopefully there's no mistakes. And one of them describes Radha and Krishna's swing. We just had the swing festival around Balaram's appearance. So you have to visualize the painting. Radha and Krishna are swinging, and there's the Yamuna in the background. It's an idyllic scene, where blooming flowers spread their sweet perfumes, where clear Yamuna flows and songbirds sing, where all the land a lovely light illumes, Shri Radha and Shri Krishna gently swing. This pastime of their love in Braja's bowers forever charms their dearest devotees, whose hearts Shri Krishna's sweetness overpowers, obscuring his prodigious potencies. Whatever in this world we know as love is just a shadow of the love they feel. The wise aspire to learn the secrets of devotion's path and taste that love ideal. So I'll leave you with that thought, and we'll have a nice kirtan. And we'll resume our classes on Monday, but don't forget Friday at 5:30. You're going to be able to come? Oh, you work on the evening, huh? Anyway, it's going to be Radhastami. You catch it on YouTube. It'll be all recorded. Yeah, for sure. Right here, starting 5:30 on Friday. Radharani's appearance day. It's one of the sweetest festivals, yeah. But maybe next year it'll be on a Saturday, or a day when you don't work. So, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.